Right, as we draw to a close, would anyone like a final word or two? Just bringing a few threads together.
Nick's going to do another
Nick,
church
perhaps
reference.
Your theory can come into play here.
Yeah, start with the New Testament, Nick.
Well, wrapping up, we've had a good discussion. I think there's been a lot of mention of the need for infrastructure investment. Numerous references to the OECD report. That broadly said, there is a need in the developed countries and the third world countries for infrastructure. There is a gap, a funding gap, an ability to deliver gap, and there's a large opportunity for private sector and, of course, public sector in delivering the infrastructure. There's a current short-term, we think, 12 to 24 months, who knows, others will have other views on that, credit issue in the world's credit and capital markets. Olivier said markets are cyclical. Ultimately, that'll work through. It's having a short-term blip on the kind of credit terms that people are being able to access. But I think we've seen that there has been the so-called flight to quality. The biggest deals in the market at the minute are infrastructure deals in the debt markets, rather than your classic private equity deals. And generally, we see a good future for the infrastructure players. I certainly see a good future for the infrastructure players.
Andy, last.
My closing comment is there remains a huge opportunity for the private sector and for private finance in the infrastructure field. I think we've discussed many different models, and that capital will come in, and that there's private sector skills in different ways. There's the privatisation model, which was widely used in the UK in the 80s and has application worldwide. Mm-hmm. There's the PPP model, which is more about allocating risks between the public sector and the private sector in a different form. And then there will be sort of more conventional procurement, and there are major projects. I mentioned Crossrail earlier. So I think while there may be temporary issues around the so-called credit crunch, in terms of taking the long-term view, I think there remain enormous opportunities for the private sector in terms of working with government and working on major infrastructure projects.
Olivier, a quick final word on the credit crunch.
Yeah, well, on the credit crunch, I don't know how long it will last, but I think and what we see is that utilities, infrastructure transactions are the things that are really active at the moment. I mean, in a CLO structure space, the things that are very active are CLOs of project finance. You said the banks have appetite for these exposures, but they tend more and more to repackage that and offload this exposure anyway. So there is still capital market execution. So there are all good reasons why there should be less exposed to volatility and market risk, because it has this very long-term characteristic, which is probably the most obvious definition with the barriers to entry. So.
Mm-hmm. Paul?
The fundamentals for wanting investment in long-term infrastructure haven't changed at all. The degree of due diligence that we do on all of our transactions, which are 6 months to 2 years in the making, means that this sector is not beset by the problems you see affecting a lot of the credit crunch. It's almost sort of what crunch and let's go unabated. So I think the future is very promising.
And finally, Martin, as the equity investor amongst us.
Well, I think the future is very bright. But I think the future is about investing in improving existing infrastructure assets and building new ones. I think that's where the growth comes from. And of course, whilst that gives us a great opportunity to invest in those sectors and to make good returns for our investors, it also places upon us a huge responsibility, because we touch so many people's lives with the services that we're providing. And if we don't provide those services at a very good and high quality, then it's sort of like a virtuous circle. If we don't do it well, we're not going to be allowed to do it. If we do it well, more infrastructure will become available. So we as an industry need to make sure we do it very, very well.